Last week, we walked through fire. We stood beside the broken, the persecuted, the trembling, God's people struggling to stay faithful in a world gone mad. We listened to psalms of deep repentance, of hearts cracked open under pressure, of enemies closing in, but also of hope that pierced the darkest night.
But this week, the focus shifts, not from pain, but to the person we run to in the pain. 4 Psalms, 4 revelations, 1 God, a refuge in the storm, Psalm 46, a king over chaos, Psalm 47, a judge who doesn't just sit, but stands, Psalm 75, and a blessing so rich it drips straight from heaven, Psalm 67.
These 4 Psalms do not just remind us that God is near. They are not just songs, they are declarations that scream to a trembling world. God is not far. He is right here, and He reigns. So buckle up, because what's coming is not just about how we survive the storm, it's about who commands the wind.
Hi, dear. Thank you for joining in today. If it's your first time here, we are super glad you could join us. Don't forget to subscribe for more. It's Q2E9, the concluding part of our short series, In the Psalms. Let's dive in.
Have you ever felt like the ground beneath your life was giving way? Not just figuratively, but as if the entire world around you was literally falling apart. Maybe it was the news of a loss, a diagnosis that crushed your peace, a betrayal you never saw coming. Moments when even the mountains of your faith tremble and collapse into the sea of your doubt. Any witnesses in the house? Or is it just me?
Trust me, you're not alone. If you had a real conversation with your next-door neighbor, you'd learn something fast. Everyone's going through something. This isn't new. The patriarchs walked through fire. The prophets endured storms. But lately, the heat's been turning up.
I agree. There is an all-round progressive decay of our world. And it's not just personal. Nature is shaking, systems are breaking, and humanity, we've been throwing punches at each other in the name of pride and power for as far back as I can remember. Which brings us to our first Psalms today, Psalms 46. And guess what?
Psalm 46 has an opinion on the matter. Verses 2b reads, Though the earth give way, though the mountains fall into the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the nations rage and kingdoms fall.
That's a lot of natural disasters, but that's not the only problem.
Verse 6 also highlights another reason for chaos. And yes, you guessed right. Man's inhumanity to man and its consequences, it had to be there. It reads, Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. But the psalmist, he's unshaken. Even with this two-pronged chaos beyond our control, he declares, We will not fear.
And why is that?
That's a good question. We find our answers in verse 1, and it reads, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Not a future help, not a distant help, but a very present help.
That's interesting, because in the midst of a storm, our default is usually to get so preoccupied with the details of the storm that we forget, in whose hands we rest, but not the psalmist. He doesn't point to a better escape plan, though he points to a better reality, a God who is not shaken even when the world is.
Exactly. Not a band-aid for broken systems. Not a plan B when your strength runs out, but a very present help in the thick of it. And that's not just poetic, it's prophetic. His confidence lies in knowing that all things answer to him in whose hands he rests.
Extrapolating this principle to events that mark the end of our world, you will notice a similarity between verse 2 and other texts that talk about how things wrap up here. For instance, Psalms 46 verse 2, our reference text, reads, "Though the earth be removed, though the mountains be carried into the sea." Revelation 6 verse 14 reads, "The heavens receded like a scroll. Every mountain and island was removed." 2 Peter 3 verse 12 reads, "That day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the heat." Do you notice any recurring events in this text?
I think so. The texts seem to suggest this world is not going to last forever. We are not evolving upward. We are spiraling toward a divine reset.
Exactly. Before it gets better, it's going to get worse. The grand climax of Earth's history will mean the breakdown of worldly kingdoms, the miserable systems of human government that have caused so much suffering over the millennia. This principle is reiterated all over the Bible. Daniel 2 and 7 warned us, "Kingdoms rise and fall, none secure for God's people." Matthew 24 called it the beginning of birth pains. Luke 21 echoed it, nations in distress, signs in the sky, fear flooding the hearts of men. 2 Timothy 3 prophesied selfishness, pride, brutality, and betrayal. Even Jeremiah saw it. "I looked, and the earth was formless and empty. The heavens had no light. The mountains were shaking." And FYI, and that's not fiction, that's forecast. The signs aren't coming, they're here. This isn't poetic exaggeration, it's prophetic truth.
But hold on, thankfully, it's not all doom and gloom. There is a promise tucked in the pages.
Revelation 21:1. "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first had passed away. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God." God will eventually reset our world to what He originally intended it to be, devoid of all pain and suffering. He resets the world, not with annihilation, but restoration. The new Jerusalem descends. Peace replaces pain. Permanently. Yes, it'll get darker before it gets brighter. And yes, it'll hurt before it heals.
So, as we navigate through these pre-reset events, the psalmist counsels, remember, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. As we find in Psalms 46 verse 2, "Therefore, be still and know that He is God." Because what comes after the storm will be worth every second you waited.
Let's sum it up. 1. In the short term, it will get worse before it gets better. But in the midst of the storm, God is not distant in crisis. He's very present. Remember the 2. Peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's the presence of God. Know this and no peace 3. Our world is temporary, but our refuge in God is eternal. Nations will fall, kingdoms will crumble, but the throne of God, unshaken, unchallenged, unmoved. 4. In case you're still not sure, look to the cross. If you ever question who or where God is in the middle of your storm, remember the cross. He didn't just speak love, he bled it.
In extension, the next time your world is in turmoil and nothing seems to make sense, remember this. You are not abandoned. You are not unseen. You are not without help. So be still and know that He is God.
And that brings us to a very interesting question. Who really owns this world? When wars erupt, bombs drop, empires rise, and politicians puff their chests, who actually holds the deed to this planet?
Let's rewind. In the Genesis account, God doesn't just speak the world into being, He breathes purpose into it. So by creation, it rightfully belongs to God. Then He crowns humanity with dominion, entrusting us with the stewardship of creation, Genesis 1:26-28. But then the trade happened. Not a fair one, not a wise one, but a fatal one. Romans 6:16 throws down the verdict. To whom you yield yourselves as servants to obey, His servants you are. That's it. Adam surrendered, and with one bite of disobedience, the planet was signed over.
Meaning, Satan was not just bluffing when he offered the kingdoms of this world to Jesus in Luke 4 verse 6. In Job 1 verse 7, again he paraded before God, not just as an accuser, but as the claimant. I've been walking to and fro across the earth, he said. Translation, this is mine. And for a while, it looked like he was right. The headlines, the heartbreak, the horror, it all screamed darkness is winning. But then Calvary happened. Jesus stepped into enemy territory, not just to teach or heal, but to redeem and reclaim. And that He did, in blood and sacrifice. Revelation 11 verse 15 declares it loud and clear. The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of His Christ.
In ancient times, walking a land wasn't just casual, it symbolized ownership. That's why in Genesis 13:17, God tells Abraham, "Walk the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So, when Satan strutted before God in Job 1, saying, "I've been walking to and fro across the earth," he wasn't making small talk, he was making a claim. But Psalm 47 breaks the illusion, verses 1 through 4. It read, "God has gone up with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a trumpet. He will subdue the peoples under us and the nations under our feet." God has gone up with a shout. You are probably wondering, wait, under our feet? Yep, you heard me right. This is not just poetic flair. This is prophetic fire.
Daniel 7 verse 27 makes it undeniable. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. Hebrews 2 verse 5 to 9 echoes it again. It is not to angels that He has subjected the world to come. What is mankind that you are mindful of them? You crowned them with glory, and honor, and you put everything under their feet. You see the pattern? In Eden, we had dominion. In sin, we lost it. In Christ, we are being restored. Romans 8, verse 17 ties it all together. We are heirs, heirs of God and co heirs with Christ. So, while Jesus reigns as King, we get to reign with Him. It is God's intention to reinstate us to our pre fall state with all its privileges, including dominion.
Okay, I get it. Can we now get into the third psalm for our study today? Psalm 75. I'm kinda curious. What inspired the psalm? What are the major highlights in those thought provoking 10 verses? And how do they help us better understand Revelation?
Let's do this. Ever been so surrounded by a problem that escape felt impossible? Like all the odds were against you and no one, not even God, seemed to be showing up?
That is exactly where Jerusalem stood when Psalm 75 was born. Or at least that's what many scholars believe. The backdrop: a national crisis, a terrifying showdown. One of those, God, if you don't move now, we're finished kind of moments. Let's rewind the tape a bit to the Sennacherib situation to find in 2 Kings 18, 19, and 2 Chronicles 32. The year 701 BC. The villain, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, ruthless, unstoppable. The target, Jerusalem, a city trembling behind fragile walls. His message: not even your God can save you. You get the picture?
The people froze. Hezekiah prayed, and the city waited. But then God acted. One angel, one night, 185,000 enemy soldiers gone. No sword drawn, no strategy executed. Just divine judgment. Swift, precise, unmistakable.
The next morning, silence. The enemy had retreated. Jerusalem was spared without lifting a finger. However bad the problems are, as believers, we are reminded to live with hope, not to judge the future by the current events. Remember that.
And for the almost Christians and the wicked, remember this: God is a merciful, persevering, and full of compassion. But when grace is continually snubbed, we leave Him no choice but to eradicate evil and all who hold on to it. We see exact same principle in Revelation 14, 9 through 12. The third angel's message: know this and know peace.
This psalm sounds like a victory anthem after divine intervention. But it is more than that. It is a declaration, a warning, a promise.
In verse 1, the people don't just say thanks, they erupt in worship. They credit their survival not to strategy, but to the righteous judge. In verses 2 to 5, God reminds us, I don't judge on your schedule, but on mine. Pride, arrogance, rebellion, He sees it all. And when the clock strikes, His judgment will neither be delayed nor denied. In verses 6 to 8, we are reminded that promotion doesn't come from kings, polls, or power blocks. It comes from God. He humbles one and exalts another, and for the wicked, There's a cup waiting, and believe me, it's not communion. In verses 9 to 10, this psalm doesn't end in dread. It ends in music, in defiant hope. God promises, I will cut off the horns of the wicked, but the horns of the righteous shall be lifted up.
Why does this sound very familiar?
It should. It echoes Revelation 20. After the millennium and Satan is released, he rallies the nations one more time. They surround God's people again. But then fire falls from heaven. Judgment strikes. God wins. His people stand vindicated. It's deja vu on a divine scale.
But why does this keep happening? Why do the same battles replay generation after generation?
That's a great question, because sin does not just break people, it breaks perspective. Truth is no longer truth. It's become your truth, my truth, whatever you believe. What was shameful a generation ago is now the trending headline. And if you dare push back, oh, you are definitely judging. You're labeled outdated, old school, or irrelevant. Morality is on the auction block. Power is weaponized. And the collateral damage everywhere.
But here's the good news. This isn't the end of the story. God has a reset plan, not a patch, not a reform, a full divine reboot. Judgment will come, justice will stand, and truth will reign again.
But until then, we don't fold, we don't flee, we live intentionally. We must do our part now to try make the life of others better. We keep our eyes locked, not on the chaos of what is, but the certainty of what will be. Because the world may be spiraling, but the kingdom, it is right on schedule.
And now we arrive at our final psalm for this session, Psalm 67. But spoiler alert, this one's not about you. Or rather, it is, but only so others can find him through you. Let's zoom in on the opening verses. It reads, May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face shine on us, so that your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among all nations.
Whoa. Did you catch that? The psalmist is not asking for blessings so he can ball out. He's asking for blessing on a mission to reflect God. Not just grace, but one that glows. Not just provision, but provision that points. Not just peace, but one that preaches.
It's like he's saying, God, light me up so the world can find their way to you through me. Set me ablaze, make me a lighthouse for lost souls in a stormy sea. Because if God can trust you with influence, he just might trust you with eternal impact.
But here is the problem. Far too often, we treat this end-time movement like a spiritual VIP lounge. Frequent flyers of prophecy, boarding passes stamped with theological clarity, and a quiet smugness that says, at least we're ready.
But what about the rest of the world?
They're stuck in the overcrowded gate lounge, unwarned, unprepared, unloved. But that's not the calling of the remnant. Revelation 14 doesn't show them lounging, it shows them flying across the skies, urging the nations, shouting with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory."
Okay, so let's bring it home. This is the crux of the matter. Here's where it gets personal. Question is, what are you doing about it? Scratch that. Allow me to rephrase the question. Ever since you gave your life to Christ, or better still, in the last 2 quarters of the year, what value have you added to the cause of God, especially in the business of bringing His children back home? What are you willing to do differently about it going forward? What if you aimed for one soul a week? What if you let your life scream Jesus louder than your sermons? What if your testimony became someone else's turning point? Because that is when things become a global broadcast. And that's a wrap, folks. This week's journey ends here. But next week, we explore the topic upon whom the urns have come. Until then, keep sharing the gospel like lives depend on it, because they actually do. This is your Sabasco Doodle, doodling out. Let's keep making it make sense, one truth, one lesson, one session at a time.
Thanks for riding with us today, friend. If this study stirred your heart, go ahead, like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a word right now. And hey, if you haven't yet made that life-altering decision to follow Christ, you still can. But don't wait. The clock is ticking. Grace is calling. I'll catch you next week, God willing. Until then, remember, we're still auditioning to take over in heaven. No retreat, no surrender,